At the end of the 19th century, Glasgow was a thriving centre of industry and shipbuilding and one of the largest and richest cities in the world. But this wealth hid a terrible blight, slums of desperate poverty and frightful disease that had plagued the city for decades. Indeed, they lasted right up to the 1960s. In the early Victorian era, when the philosopher and journalist Frederick Engels described the conditions of the working class in England, he stated that its poor districts may be regarded as the sources of those frightful epidemics which, beginning here, spread desolation over Glasgow. It's no small wonder that Glasgow, in the Victorian era, was a city where sickness could run rampant, for its filthy conditions were a breeding ground for disease. Many lived in wretched, overcrowded squalor in courts and blind alleys leading off a labyrinth of lanes and wynds. Dilapidated, ill-ventilated homes were piled high with inhabitants, sometimes 3 or 4 families to a single floor, and it was not unusual to find 20 people packed, one on top of another. Sleeping places could be found covered with a complete layer of human beings, men and women indiscriminately stretched upon the floor, often 15 to 20, some clad, others naked, with beds no more than a litter of mouldy straw mixed with rags. There was little or no furniture, and the only thing which gave these dens any shimmer of being habitable was a fire upon the hearth. Theft and prostitution was rife. Today, in an account by Stephen Spurrier, a renowned newspaper illustrator, writing in the 1920s, you will discover that these dystopian living conditions endured well into the 20th century, until the city began to tackle the problem through demolition and renewal. Find out how, before the city's evil slums were finally razed to the ground, Glaswegians were so tightly packed into cramped, back-to-back tenements that some residents lived in perpetual darkness. Change would come, but slowly. In the meantime, people endured intolerable damp, disease, and sickness, extracting a deadly toll on too many lives. Before we move on, if you're interested in history like this, and you want to find out more about what life was really like for people in the past, please consider subscribing for more content. If you'd like to support what we make for you, check out the description for links to ways you can help us continue bringing the past alive. In these days, one hears very much of the housing problem. For various causes, and in greater or less measure, it is affecting all classes and all cities. Slums are prevalent all over the country, indeed, all over the world, and almost all large communities have their quota, even in villages, though they are constantly drained to send more workers to the cities. There is often little enough room for those that are left. Today, we are dealing in the briefest manner with one section only: slum areas of Glasgow. The overcrowding in this city is appalling, and the clearance of slums a most important problem, a most difficult task, and in most cases where it is accomplished, a great achievement. The problem is being attacked with much vigour by the authorities in Glasgow. There are several classes who need help to live under healthier and more sanitary conditions: the clerk, the bookkeeper, the budding professional man, the young skilled worker, and many others are being accommodated on the outskirts of the city, in villas standing in their own gardens on beautiful, undulating ground on the southern side called Moss Park, an easy tram ride from the heart of the city. For those who wish to live closer to their work, the corporation has built commodious apartment houses with grass plots surrounding them, and in good broad streets with pavements at Copla Hill. This district is also on the south side, a few minutes tram or train ride from the Clyde. When the young artisan marries, he hopes to find a home near his work and puts down his name to be somewhere on the list for the vacancy. In the meantime, he and his wife must live somewhere. Naturally, they go to live with his parents, who have none too much room as it is. These are the cases that are being helped at Glasgow. The gradual clearance of the slum areas is a slow process. The city, as most people know, is built on hills. Tall blocks of flats are the principal dwellings for nearly all classes, and for the upper classes they are well built and comfortable enough. In the slum areas, they are very high and closely packed. At the best, they have a small courtyard in the centre, but many of them are back to back. This condition is, I think, little known in the south, but in Scotland and in our own Black Country, the West Midlands, is still to be found. It means that houses are not only built in rows, but that the back walls of one row are also the back walls of the row behind, so that light and air can only come from the front of the house. There is little ventilation, and in such narrow streets practically no light in the lower houses. Still more prevalent and just as difficult to deal with is the block of flats that began as 2 rows of tenements with a courtyard between them at the back. In the course of time, another row was built in the courtyard, with dividing walls halfway down on each side, joining them to the original buildings. This arrangement means that between 2 parallel streets there are 3 rows of houses, with only a yard or 2 of space between them, and that minute space is filled with lines of family washing. The only means of access to the most unfortunate centre row is through a series of passages, like little tunnels, under the houses, leading from one street or court to another. Interior staircases are narrow and quite dark most of the year. One sees the same kind of thing in the old towns in France and Italy, but there the sun saturates everything and adds joyousness and colour and romance. In Scotland there is much suggestion of romance too, but of a dour and sombre kind, for there is little sun and very much rain, mist and smoke. The barefooted urchin, blue with cold and sodden with rain, is in much harder case than his counterpart, the gammon of the south, who can live and thrive on macaroni, oil and sunshine. To the dweller in those closed, packed, romantic but evil houses where almost total darkness reigns supreme on the landings, only a very faint glimmer of light reaches the first floor from the skylight in the roof, and through the gratings of the 5th and 6th floors on the brightest of days. Here, in these confined quarters, teeming life goes on in all its intimate details. When it is raining, as it often is, children play, family feuds take place, the news of the dwelling is freely bandied from mouth to mouth. Life in all its most intimate phases, birth, death, and marriage, proceeds in all these confined spaces, where damp, age, smoke, disease, and sickness tell their tale and take their toll. In this illustration, on a fine summer's day in a slum backland area, only a very little light and very little air can circulate between these blocks of dwellings, which are old and ill-kept. Depicted here is a T-shaped first-floor landing. The tenement is 5 or 6 stories high, and has steep staircases. The landings are as dark as night, and to see a number on a door, or to walk along a corridor, matches must be struck. There are about 10 apartments to each landing. This drawing illustrates back to front and front to back smaller, old houses of 2 floors, let off into single rooms, dark, damp and airless. The woman is taking ashes to the ash pit, a haunt for all the stray cats of the neighbourhood. Here you can see a typical apartment in a Glasgow tenement occupied by 3 generations, where the whole activities of the family are carried out, from cradle to grave. 11% of the houses are of 1 room, and over 50% are of 1 and 2 rooms. That is not to say 2 bedrooms, but 2 apartments or 1 apartment. In the great slum areas of Cowcaddens, Anderston, etc., a change for the better is distinctly noticeable to the lay mind. The corporation has bought a number of old blocks of dwellings from private owners, and is gradually pulling them down. Of great blocks of dwellings forming a hollow square, one side has been razed to the ground, thereby giving the remaining 3 sides more air to breathe and more light to see. The destroyed tenements had to be replaced by more suitable ones, and to this end ground and sites at a higher elevation had to be bought. The ground laid out, and a suitable type of apartment chosen. The inhabitants have been transferred to these new dwellings on the heights of Hamilton Hill. These tenements comprise 2 or 3 roomed apartment houses. The 2-roomed apartment consists of 1 bedroom, 1 sitting room, scullery, bathroom and lavatory. They are let at a rental of 28 shillings a month, inclusive. The 3-roomed apartment house has the same accommodation with 1 extra bedroom at 35 shillings a month. I believe the hire of an iron bedstead is included in the rent in both cases. This illustration shows the clearance of an overcrowded area, giving more light and air to existing tenements. In this drawing you can see 2 typical interiors in the new apartment houses at Hamilton Hill. On the left is the sitting room. The one fire can be used both for this room and the scullery kitchen. On the right, the other side of the wall. These apartment houses all contain a bath and a lavatory, with hot and cold water from the kitchen boiler. This illustration shows a square of new tenements at Hamilton Hill, with plenty of light and air and open spaces for children to play. There have been several clearances which have been very wisely utilised in another manner. Wooden, 1-storied kindergarten schools have been erected, and in the sunniest places. Single-storied roofed shelters provided for the use of the toddlers under school age, where their mothers can leave them to play in safety in the light and air. In other places, island sites of old works have been acquired, and playgrounds with swings and so forth erected in their place. But when all this has been done, the mentality of the slum takes time to change. Generations of slum tradition cannot be eradicated in a few months, even in good surroundings, and so there often comes the danger of the old slum tenant in the new model dwelling going on in his old unsavoury way, and from choice still crowding himself and his family into 2 rooms, and reserving the other one for funerals and other festivities. Still, wider streets, lower houses, sufficient light, water and sanitation cannot help having a good effect on the youth of the city, and there lies the hope of the future. At Hamilton Hill, and on all sides, one hears that children are better in health already. Infant mortality is still terrible, but with these improved conditions, the coming generation ought to be better both in mind and body. To citizens who have for years been used to or have adapted themselves to evil conditions, the change of breathing purer air and of being able to read or do needlework without the aid of artificial light at midday in summer must in time react to the good, not only on their general state of health and consequently on their state of mind, but what is more important still, on the minds, souls and bodies of all the generations to come.